I thought retirement was going to be the easy part, you know? After 30 years in the army long nights in the desert, calls that kept me up till dawn, choices where one wrong move could cost lives, I figured I'd earn a quiet porch, a cold beer, maybe a garden I'd never get around to planting. That's what they sell you on, right? The golden years, just you and the sunset. So when I bought this little two-story house on Pine Crest Ridge, perched on a hill overlooking a sleepy suburb in Colorado, I thought, this is it, Jack. You're done fighting. Man, was I wrong. The house wasn't much cedar siding, a creaky deck out back, and a steep, scraggly hillside that dropped into a narrow strip of land the HOA called a conservation easement. Sounded nice on paper, but it was just weeds and cracked dirt. I liked it that way kept folks from poking around. The slope was mine, clear as day in the deed, and I spent my first 2 years here fixing drainage pipes, shoring up the retaining wall, keeping the hill from sliding into the access road below. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, the kind that keeps a place standing. Then came Susan Whitaker. Susan was the new president of the Pine Crest Homeowners Association, swept into power after some drama about a neighbor's tacky Halloween decorations. She was the kind of woman who wore cardigans like they were battle armor, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. She'd stroll the neighborhood with a clipboard, her heels clicking like a metronome, pointing out crooked mailboxes or lawns that weren't green enough. I met her a month after she moved in, when she stopped by my gate, peering over her sunglasses at a patch of dandelions I hadn't gotten to yet. "Jack," she said like we were old pals, "your yard's not up to community standards." I chuckled, thinking it was a joke. She didn't blink. A week later, a $50 fine showed up in my mailbox. That's when I knew this wasn't about dandelions. This was about control. For months, Susan's neighborhood enhancement campaign turned Pine Crest into her personal fiefdom. She pushed for new walking trails, fancy flower beds, even a community fountain nobody asked for. The HOA board, a bunch of her hand-picked buddies, rubber-stamped every idea. I stayed out of its scene, too many petty tyrants in my time to get riled up over a few extra shrubs. But then, one April morning, I heard it, a grinding mechanical roar from the hill behind my house. I stepped onto the deck, coffee in hand, and saw a backhoe tearing into my slope like it was digging for gold. Orange-vested workers were spraying paint lines, pounding stakes, acting like my land was theirs. I marched down, heart pounding, and flagged down a kid with a hard hat. "What the hell's this?" I asked. He shrugged. "HOA's orders. Something about runoff." Runoff my ass. I had the survey. That hill was mine. I called the HOA office voicemail. A mail bounced back. So I grabbed my property docs and drove to their little clubhouse. Locked tight, nobody home. That night, I called my old Army buddy, Claire, now a property lawyer in Denver. She didn't mince words. "Jack, this is trespass. Document everything." So I did. Next morning, I was out there with my phone, filming every scoop of dirt, every tire track crossing my property line. I could feel my blood boiling, not just because they were on my land, but because nobody, not Susan, not the board, not even the damn workers thought I deserved a heads up. What I didn't know then, what none of US knew, was that my hill wasn't just holding back dirt. It was anchoring something bigger, a high-voltage utility pole, one of those old steel giants carrying 200,000 volts to half the neighborhood. Every scoop they took was chipping away at its base, like kids poking at a dam with a stick. A few days later, I woke to a sound I hadn't heard since Cabula Low, angry rumble, like the earth itself was growling. I bolted to the window. The backhoe was back, now, well past my property line, clawing closer to my retaining wall. No cones, no flags, just a gash in the hillside. I grabbed my jacket, my camera, and stormed down. "Hey," I shouted, waving at the operator. "You're on my land. Shut it down." He gave me a blank stare like I was a ghost and kept digging. I started filming, panning across the trench, the stakes, the pole that was starting to lean, just enough to make my stomach twist. A guy in an HOA polo shirt tom, mid-30s, sweating through his collar, jogged over. "You can't be here, sir. Safety rules." I held up my phone, showing the survey map. "This is my lot, Tom. You're trespassing. Where's the permit?" He stammered. "It's approved by the board." "Show me," I said. He didn't have it. Nobody did. That night, I went to the HOA's monthly meeting, still in my muddy boots, carrying a folder thick with proof deeds, surveys, photos. The room was packed, neighbors sipping lemonade, pretending not to notice the tension. Susan sat at the front, cool as ever, her pen tapping like a war drum. I didn't wait for an invitation. "You're digging on my property," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "No notice, no permits, no rights." She barely looked up. "Jack, the board approved a drainage project for the community's benefit. You were notified." "Bullshit," I said, and a few gasps rippled through the crowd. I slapped a photo on the Tablia backhoe, mid-dig, 10 feet past my boundary. "That's my land, Susan. You don't own it." She smiled tight and cold. "We'll review the matter." I walked out, knowing she wouldn't. The next morning, it rained a light drizzle, just enough to turn the trench into a muddy scar. I noticed the slope sagging near the utility pole, the ground soft under my boots. That pole, it wasn't just a pole. It was a lifeline for 40 homes, and it was tilting maybe 10 degrees, enough to make the wires hum nervously. I called the county utilities office. They promised a guy in a week. A week? I didn't have a day. That night, the power flickered, then died. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped outside, and saw it. The pole, leaning hard now, wires sagging like a tightrope about to snap. The hill hissed, a sickening sound of earth giving way. I didn't sleep. Every gust of wind felt like a countdown. By dawn, the pole had shifted another inch. I called 911. "This isn't a crime," I told the dispatcher, "but that pole's going to kill someone if it falls." That got their attention. Cops showed up, then fire trucks, then utility crews with drones and clipboards. Susan rolled up in her white SUV, hair perfect, like she was late for a brunch. She saw the police tape, the crowd of neighbors, and her face froze. She started yelling at a utility guy, waving her clipboard like it was a magic wand. "This is a community project," she insisted. The guy cut her off. "Did you check with us before digging near a high-voltage line?" She froze. I thought it was clear. "You thought wrong," he said. "This pole's a death trap now." The crews worked all night, bracing the pole with steel cables, rerouting power while half the neighborhood went dark. Susan sent me a letter the next day, hand-delivered. No stamp. It called me out for obstructing community progress and threatened fines, maybe a lawsuit. I laughed, pinned it to my wall, and sent a copy to Claire. "They're scared," she said. "Keep pushing." So I did. I dug through old records my father-in-law, a retired surveyor, had left me. Tucked in a dusty folder was a gem, a 1984 covenant, signed by the original developer, stating my slope could never be touched without my consent, a city engineer's approval, and a utility rep signature. Susan had none of those. The HOA had been lying about owning that land since day one. The storm hit a week later, not a big one, just enough to soak the open trench. I was checking the slope when I heard it. A groan, metal bending, earth slipping. The pole was moving, tilting like a drunk. I sprinted to my neighbor Mike's house, a retired cop with a bad knee. "Get your family out back now," I shouted. He didn't argue, just grabbed his kid and dog. I yelled to the next house, "Stay inside." Then it happened. The ground shook, the pole snapped, twisting into the access road below with a crash that echoed like thunder. Sparks flew, a transformer blew, and the neighborhood went black. Susan showed up as the sirens wailed, still clutching that damn clipboard, yelling at a firefighter who ignored her. I stood there, soaked, watching her unravel. A utility engineer walked over, shaking my hand. "Your calls save lives," he said. "This could have been a disaster." I nodded, too tired to speak. The state opened an investigation into the HOA that night. I sent them everything: photos, videos, the covenant, the fake maps Susan's board had filed, shifting my property line 30 feet to claim my hill. It wasn't just negligence. It was fraud. The emergency HOA meeting was a circus. Susan stood at the front, trying to spin it as a weather event. I walked up, calm as I could, and laid out 3 things: my original survey, her forged map, and the county's report blaming her excavation. "You didn't just dig on my land," I said, staring her down. "You lied about owning it. You nearly killed us all." The room exploded, neighbors shouting, demanding answers. Mike stood up, voice steady. "Jack warned me. Save my family." Others chimed in, stories of Susan's fines, her threats, her bullying. By the end, 3 board members quit on the spot. Susan stormed out, her lawyer trailing like a lost puppy. The city audit hit hard. All HOA projects were frozen. Susan was barred from leadership, and the state attorney's office started sniffing around. I handed over the covenant to the city clerk, who grinned and said, "This is bulletproof." The news ran a story called me the man who stopped the fall. Neighbors started coming by, bringing coffee, thanking me. Mike's wife made brownies. For the first time, folks weren't afraid to put out lawn gnomes or fly flags Susan had banned. But Susan wasn't done. She sent a lawsuit, threat, defamation, disruption, the works. I called Claire. "She's bluffing," she said, laughing. "Let her try." The lawsuit died quietly, withdrawn with a vague excuse about family matters. By then, the city asked me to join a task force on HOA reform. I sat with other homeowners, folks who'd been fined for wheelchairs, ramps, or kids' toys, rewriting rules to stop this nonsense statewide. Back home, Mike got elected HOA president. He set term limits, killed unfair fines, and started a committee to keep things fair. The slope got fixed, new soil, wildflowers, proper drainage. It looked alive again. One evening, I saw Susan walking her dog. No clipboard, no pearls, just a tired woman in sneakers. She didn't look at me. I didn't care. A few days later, a note slipped into my mailbox and signed, "You showed us we're not powerless. Thank you." I tucked it away with my old Army medals. That night, Mike came over for beers on the deck. We watched the valley lights flicker on, the hill green and steady below. "They'll talk about you for years," he said. I shrugged. "Let him. It's not about me. It's about what's right." So, here's the thing: what do you do when someone tries to take what's yours? Your land, your voice, your peace? Do you fight, or do you let it slide, hoping it'll pass? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done? And if you've got a story about standing up to a bully like Susan, share it. Let's keep this conversation going.